Welcome on into the Wolverine TV. Clayton Sayfie here with Chris Balas. It is game week. We'll preview Michigan versus Western Michigan. Fall camp is over with. The season is here. Fans are going to be back in the stands, so super excited for that. Please hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube and hit the subscribe button as well so you can stay up to date on all of our Michigan football, basketball, and recruiting content here. But Chris, fans back in the stands, excitement surrounding the stadium. You can kind of feel that buzz already here in Ann Arbor, so it's super exciting heading into the opener against Western Michigan.
Yeah, I can't wait, man. And I don't think it's going to be a packed stadium, Clay. I know there are going to be a lot of people there, but I think people are still a little bit scared of COVID. I think that there's a sense that this team might not be great outside the top 25, which to a man, all those guys that we've interviewed this week said they love that. And I like it too. I like that the expectations are ramped down a little bit and that these guys feel like they have something to prove because they do. Last year was an embarrassment to the program, embarrassment to all the guys that played before them, not just the results, but the way they played on the field. Was kind of disgraceful if we're going to be blunt about it. And so they feel good about it. They're excited to be playing in front of 100 some thousand fans. I'm guessing it'll be closer to 90, but I'm just excited to see fans in the stands, man. It was miserable up there in the press box last year, Clay, when we were sitting there and there's just no atmosphere and there's nobody out there. And you could tell it had an effect on the players too. So in my opinion, that's going to be the most exciting part about tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes to something we've talked about all offseason is that the body language has to be better. The culture seems like it's improved. It can't be much worse than it was last season. I expect them to come out, and I think that's kind of going to be one of the number one things I'll be looking for, along with the fact that it is the pageantry of college football back. Is that Michigan team showing more life on the sideline, between plays, during plays? I think that will be the case. Let's talk a little bit about the fall camp that was for Michigan. Let's start with a couple areas of concern that you still have coming out of fall camp, and then we'll talk about some things that maybe surprised us or we feel a little bit more encouraged about, because there are a couple of those areas too. But biggest concerns for you as Michigan concludes fall camp, heads into the opener against Western.
Line play, I think, is pretty obvious. That's still, no matter what, you can talk about speed and space and all the receivers and everything else, but football comes down to being able to win the trenches. And the offensive line, they're banged up a little bit, at least for game one. I think that'll be back to full strength in game two, but so it's not going to be a line that's played together a lot. And against a team like Western Michigan that has some capable pass rushers, granted they gave up 34 points a game last year, I think it was, Clay.
Yeah, this was an average defense, but they have a couple stats that stand out with the tackles for loss, 8.5 a game, which is a ton.
Right.
Again, MAC only schedule, so we have to have that disclaimer in for basically every stat we talk about. But still an aggressive defense. Jim Harbaugh said they are like third in the country in amount of blitzes. We don't have those stats available, but obviously Michigan has some of those, analytics available too. So aggressive. Should. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When communication is going to be key up front, and when you've got five guys that haven't played together before, it doesn't matter the individual pieces. They have depth. There's no question about it. And Sharon Moore told us that guys like Chuck Filiaga even had great camps, and he has a chance to dominate. And who knows if he's just saying that to bolster his confidence if he needs him, but we do know that he's in better shape, and I give him credit for getting his body to where it should have been, frankly, last year and the year before. But these guys haven't played together. So when you're talking about those exotic blitzes and you're talking about the stunts and the games that they play up front and the twists, that's where playing together and communication really comes into play. So that's what I'm going to be watching for. Can they run the ball? Can they blow these guys off the ball? They better, because this is a team that wants to run the ball on offense. Both Josh Gaddis, the offensive coordinator, and Jim Harbaugh, the head coach, have said the same thing. So they better be able to move these guys. And then on defense, if Western Michigan can run the ball on them, and granted, this is a good offensive football team. They've got a good quarterback. And like you said, MAC only scheduled last year, but they've got capable players. Then that's not going to bode well down the stretch for games like Washington and everything else. It's really about the defensive line. I was encouraged by the bodies of these guys. Number one, Mozzie Smith coming back at 318 pounds. He looks chiseled. Saw him again in the parking lot yesterday after we interviewed the guys. And West Side guy, got to root for those West Side guys, Clay. And loved what he did to change his body. Chris Hinton, to me, looked thicker. And, last year he kind of looked like almost too tall for the position. That's a dumb thing to say, but you know what I mean? It's like...
No, I agree. I've said the same thing, yeah.
Right, he couldn't get low enough, but this year he looks a little bit more filled out, and it got the butt got a little bigger, which is what you need for a defensive lineman. And then Donovan Jeter, we've heard a lot about him too. Their bodies, they did a really good job there, but how are they going to hold up against really good rushing attacks? So those are going to be the things that I'm going to be watching, and how this new defense plays under Mike McDonald. Because I think, as I wrote in Keys to the Game, this is a perfect test for them. Not an elite team, but an offense that knows what it's doing and wants to do. Are you going to be able to counter that with your defensive scheme when this is the first game? So a lot of interesting subplots, man, and it's college football, baby. I'm pretty excited.
I think that's a great point. It's not a team, and Western can come in and beat Michigan in this game, and it would be an absolute disaster, obviously. But they can come in and win. But at the same time, I don't expect that to happen. But I do expect them to challenge them, like you mentioned, in a couple different ways. They have a very good quarterback who, talking to a Western Michigan insider, is his strength is decision making. So that's going to test the Michigan defense, the Michigan secondary, and then you got to get a pass rush as well. It all works together. But I'll be excited too to see this Michigan defense line up. No spring game, or they had a spring game, but only in front of. We didn't get to see it. We got some intel from it. Obviously, Chris, you had outstanding reports, but we didn't get to see it with our own two eyes. So I want to see how this defense lines up, what they're doing pre-snap, how what kind of adjustments they're making from series to series, at halftime, all of that. What are a couple of things that have encouraged you? I think I know one of them is going to be the linebackers. The emergence of Nakai Hill-Green, which is huge. He's a guy that came out of nowhere. There's depth at the wide receiver spot. I think the running backs are the strongest position group on the team, at least in my opinion. You have a new corner that stepped up in DJ Turner. So there's basically 3 interchangeable corners, Jim Harbaugh said the other day. So there's guys that have stepped up. I remember when we were talking back before spring ball, we were saying, who are the guys that we're going to be talking about in the fall that made huge strides over the offseason? There's been a few of those guys. David Ojabo, another one. Chris Jenkins is a guy that Sean Nua talked about as a backup there at the defensive tackle spot, is where you have him projected on the depth chart. But a guy that we didn't talk a ton about last season because he'd just come into the program. So I'm encouraged by the emergence of some of those younger guys and frankly some of the guys that are now upperclassmen that should have probably emerged earlier. What are some of the areas that you're most encouraged about coming out of camp?
Yeah, you touched on a lot of them, man. And the linebackers. Now, Nakai Hill-Green's going to have some growing pains, guys. That's the thing. We can talk all we want to about how much better he is and how much better that position will be. There are going to be some mistakes in there. What I really like is that Josh Ross isn't making any. And last year he did not have a very good football season, and he was the first one to admit it. But you need your linebackers to be mistake-free. And I think Josh Ross, it begins and ends with him. So Nakai Hill-Green's going to be good. Michael Barrett has slipped down the depth chart a little bit. We've heard good things about the linebackers as a whole, though. If you look at even Joey Velasquez made plays in the spring game, the recent fall scrimmage. And so there are enough guys there where if some guys aren't getting the job done, I think you're going to see other guys step up. So to me, the running backs, heard great things yesterday about Hassan Haskins. We'll put that in tomorrow's Inside the Fort for our subscribers, some of the things that he's done in practice and the depth at running back, the way they're running the ball. The interesting thing, though, is, okay, does that mean the defense isn't very good then, right? If they're able to run the ball. And so that's why it's so important what Jim Harbaugh said. We feel good about our team, but you don't know anything until you play somebody because is the offense that you're going against, better than ours type of thing. So I am interested, though, to see how the running backs fare, the receivers. When they say that they want to be a run-first offense or rely a lot on the run, what does that mean for the role of the receivers? Because you've got some capable guys there, too, that need to get the ball. So, and obviously, I feel good about Cade McNamara, the work that he's put in. And when a guy like Matt Weiss, his quarterback's coach, says this is a guy who can play on Sundays, this is a guy who is coached on Sundays, so he knows what that looks like. That's encouraging. We saw some encouraging things from Cade McNamara last year, but how is he going to do when it's his show? That's really what's going to be the most intriguing thing to me. Don't turn the ball over. Don't make big mistakes, and I think they're going to have a chance to win this game pretty handily.
Yeah, Matt Weiss clearly didn't want to put a ton of pressure on Cade McNamara when we got to speak to him Wednesday, saying, don't make the mistakes just like you're talking about. Make the right reads, make the right decisions. Don't try to win the game by yourself. And I think that's an area that Cade's always been good at, really, since he came in. Jim Harbaugh talked about that early on in camp how J.J. McCarthy now is starting to, have some of those traits where he's not trying to always go for the home run ball or make the questionable decision and just, maybe check it down if you have to, move the chains, get the first down. I think that's always been a strength of Cade's, but I am excited to see if he can make some of those plays. We saw it against Rutgers. He was making some big plays out there, some gutsy, throws, guys in his face. Can he do that throughout the course of a 12-game season? I think that's going to be important for Michigan because we can talk all we want about the run game, but at the same time, you got to air it out at times. You have to be able to, stretch defenses. And I do think it's interesting that, everyone keeps talking about how they want to run the ball more. Well, last season, they threw the ball a ton. In Michigan State, against Michigan State, Joe Milton threw, 55 times or something like that. It's because they had to throw towards the end of the game. They were down in a lot of those games. I think area number one of running the ball more is don't get down in these games. Keep it at least close or stay ahead. Remember that 2018 team? They ran a ton because they were ahead in some of those games, and then they would just impose their will in the second half against Wisconsin, Penn State, several of those wins. So I think that's kind of more what I'm expecting. I don't expect them to just completely lean on only the run game because they understand that that's not, the only solution is just run the ball more and you're going to win every game. I think they still understand that, they have to be able to throw. But it will be fascinating to see what tweaks have been made to this offense with, more guys having hands on, what's going to be called and, what the game plan is. Matt Weiss, Mike Hart, Sharon Moore getting a promotion. I think that's going to be something to watch as well.
And let's be honest, you need explosive plays to win in this day and age of college football. And Kirk Herbstreit said the same thing, and I've said it for years. Quarterback play, one area in which Michigan has not been good enough. Receivers, you go back to Amara Darboh and J.U. Chesson, good, solid receivers, borderline pros, but not guys that are game breakers. Although Amara Darboh, was fantastic. He was kind of like an Jason Avant type receiver more than a Braylon Edwards. But you need those guys that every now and then you're going to get behind the defense, hit a guy in stride, and he's going to score, right? And we haven't seen nearly enough of that. And whether you're doing that by setting it up with play action or whatever, you need some of those plays because you're not going to have 14 play drives for touchdowns on every possession. That's just not going to happen. So that's why when you hear a guy like Andrell Anthony, a true freshman coming out of nowhere, and Jim Harbaugh saying getting a big play every game, one of those guys that can go over the top. You need that every now and then too, and you need to be able to design plays like that. And that's one of the things that really intrigues me watching that Alabama game last year and how they used their athletes to get them in space and get them open to make plays in the matchups they want. Can Josh Gaddis do that? Can you design some rub routes and things like that to get guys open? Because, in my opinion, they haven't adjusted well enough in some of these games in the last couple of years offensively. When things don't work, another thing that I wrote, it's almost like a hodgepodge of plays and you don't really have a plan. And that's another thing, too. With the defense, how is Mike McDonald going to be within game adjustments, having not done it? Now, Jim Harbaugh did say that he was really good in that area and that he tested him in a lot of those areas and that he really responded. But again, it's a different animal when you're playing on game day. So those are the things: adjustments on offense, adjustments on defense, explosive plays. Want to see more of those. More than anything, man, I want to see a good fundamental football team, good fundamentals and techniques, a team that plays with a lot of energy. We didn't see a lot of that last year either, Clay. One that responds well to adversity. So if they get down or if something goes wrong, they aren't going to fold and, go curl up in the fetal position on the sideline. So that's what I want to see on Saturday.
Yeah, and going off of that point, the last thing before we talk quickly about Western Michigan and give our quick predictions for this game, what is something, because we've talked about this, I think that, that Washington game week 2 is essentially a toss-up, but I have Michigan as a slight edge in that game. You've said you think Michigan's going to drop that game. What could convince you maybe this week, and I know it's a MAC opponent, so, things it's not all going to translate to week 2, but what could convince you, I guess, that this Michigan team might be a little ahead of schedule in your mind, that they could compete a little bit better against Washington?
Not much, and I'll tell you why. Because we've seen great openers in the past in which they came back and laid an egg in week 2. I can go back year by year by year. To me, and it comes back down to this: the fundamentals. And the energy. Are they good fundamentally? How they respond to adversity, and and basically are the penalties, things like that, the energy. That's what I want to see from this team. If they say they win by 10 points and everybody's like, oh my God, that's terrible, well, a win's a win, and then you improve on it. I remember some Notre Dame teams under Lou Holtz, probably before your time, that had terrible week one games and then looked like world beaters in week two. And Lou's like, hey, man, that's part of the deal. The cliche that you get your best, you get most improvement from game one to game two is true, and but it is a cliche, but it is true. So it really just comes down to the basics for me, and I want to see a team that seems to like each other with a lot of energy. Has some playmakers out there. I don't think they're going to show their entire hand against Western Michigan. Maybe they'll have to win this game. Who knows? But like you said, man, you lose this one, and all bets are off the table as far as going forward, because you don't know how this group will react, having been in that situation before last year. So that's where I am right now.
Yep, I think that's completely fair. And, I will say one of the exceptions to the improvement from week one to week two would be Michigan last year. And that goes to your point about, the openers don't tell you a ton. And, Minnesota, we thought they were probably a little bit better. Well, certainly than, we thought they were going to be. Let's talk about Western real quick. Caleb Ellaby is kind of the name to know on offense. Was third in the country in passing efficiency behind these two names, Mac Jones, who had an all-time season in college football, and Zach Wilson, the number 2 overall pick to the New York Jets from BYU. Again, the caveat there is the fact that they played a MAC-only schedule, but still impressive. I mean, nobody else was up there. So he was third in the country. We mentioned a little bit earlier that they finished fifth in tackles for loss per game at 8.5. This is an aggressive defense. They lose Dwayne Eskridge, a second-round pick to the Seattle Seahawks, wide receiver, but they have a couple guys coming back. Jalen Hall is a name to know at wideout. He scored a touchdown, at least one, in every game last season. He had 7 scores on the year in 6 games. He averaged 27 yards per reception, which led the nation, so he can make the big play. Those are a few names to know. 17-point favorites for Michigan over Western Michigan, the over-under at 67, so they're expecting some points in this game, which I think is fair coming off of Michigan's defensive performance last season and the fact that they have a new coordinator. I have Michigan winning by about 20 points here. I think the under is gonna go under 67 points. I just think that's quite a bit. And Western Michigan's offense, some of those stats are a little bit inflated from that MAC-only schedule last season.
Yeah, and I think you're about right there. And we'll have our staff predictions out tomorrow, so guys can look for that. But I think this is a game where Michigan wins relatively comfortably. It could be a game in the third quarter, and people shouldn't be surprised like that. The last time Michigan opened with Western Michigan, I think, was 2011. Am I right? And
yeah, the last time they opened with them, but they played them in 18.
Yep, and Western went right down the field and scored on the first, and the message boards were going crazy. And but guess what? They improved, and that's they had Greg Madison as your defensive coordinator back then, and you got better with adjustments. So again, it comes back down to adjustments and things like that. It wouldn't shock me if Western had a couple of really nice drives early in this game, as Michigan's brand new defense gets adjusted to what they're doing, and gets used to things on the field under Mike McDonald. So, but I do think that Michigan wins comfortably, setting up a big one next week against Washington. And I'm not going to say that's a make or break game for the season, but it certainly is make or break as far as your huge expectations for the season. If you get to 4-0 with this team and you develop some confidence going into that Wisconsin game, Clay, then it could be pretty intriguing and pretty interesting. So, but again, it starts with Saturday, and there are a lot of people that say, hey, look out for this Western Michigan team. I understand what they didn't play last year and who they didn't play, but I really do like how they're coached, and I like that they seem to have an identity, and they know what they're doing. It's like you told me about Ellaby. He knows what he's doing with the football, and one of his best attributes is as a decision maker. So it's going to be a big test early for this Michigan defense.
No doubt. So keep it locked at thewolverine.com. We got tons of pregame coverage over the next couple days leading up to the noon kickoff on Saturday, and then tons of postgame coverage Saturday, Sunday, and beyond, and then obviously leading into that Washington game. So a big week for the site over at thewolverine.com. Check us out there, and we'll see everybody next week.